Hello, I'm Jenny Fern and welcome to my library. I'm a chaotic neutral mechanical engineer who's really into permaculture and wants to talk about books. So let's talk about books. Several months ago, I embarked on a journey to read the second book from an author where I read one of their books and I gave it 5 stars. So this video spans basically my whole summer. I hope you enjoy it. There are disappointments and there are supreme surprises. I got 5 books that I have never read before. I bought them. I didn't even borrow them from the library because they're not available, because they are from authors that I read last year that I loved their books, and I have never read anything else from them. So one of those books is Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. I just loved to pieces. So I got her book, Teaching a Stone to Talk, which is blurbed by R. Buckminster Fuller, and I did read his book, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, and I did a quite thorough review on that if you want to see that somewhere. Yes, I have this book and it's very thin. So I love The Little Prince. I love The Little Prince so much. I've never read anything else by this author. So I was explaining that I got this book by this author, which is about his time like as a pilot. A lot of his books are actually like flying related, and this book is flying related. And I was reading on the back cover that he disappeared flying over the Mediterranean a year after writing The Little Prince. It made The Little Prince hit even harder for me, because this man was really tackling the ideas of death and like coming to terms with death. Obviously he'd seen a lot of death in his experiences living. Imagining that he wrote this book a year before he died, and how his like thoughts and stuff about death really come across in this book. Anyway, it really got to me, so this is that book. It's a little bit thicker. I'm hoping that I love it. It's such a different book. It's such a different book compared to The Little Prince. I read a book called Silent Earth, Averting the Insect Apocalypse by Dave Goulson. The Garden Jungle, or Gardening to Save the Planet. Love Gardening to Save the Planet. That is one of the prime motivators for me gardening, is for the environmental impacts, and just I think it's a good way to live life on this planet. I do have 2 more books coming and they aren't here yet. They are a book called, I think it's called The Dot and the Line, and that's by Norton Juster, who is the author of The Phantom Tollbooth, which I reread last year and I just adore. So The Dot and the Line seems like more of a children's, like straight children's book, but I'm really excited to read that as well. It seems very like math focused. Then I got a book called A Bitter Magic by Roderick Townley, which is like a middle grade. I did briefly mention this book because I read The Great Good Thing by Roderick Townley and I loved it. I really loved it. I was really interested in what else he had written because The Great Good Thing was such an interesting reading experience for me. I'm really distractible right now. I gotta take my dog out. I'm also so hungry. Looks like my little dog is gonna drink some water. I also have 2 pieces of book mail. Let's open those up. I'm so excited. I got the books that I was just talking about, and that is The Dot and the Line. It is so cute. I'm so excited for it. Oh my god. Wait. This is more of like an art book than a children's book. A Bitter Magic also showed up. I didn't expect it to be this large. I thought it was going to be a small little paperback, but it's a big hardcover. I found a piece of ephemera in this book, which is exceedingly delicate and is probably one of the coolest ephemera pieces that I've found in a used book. It's been great so far. Lots of fun math stuff. Lots of puns. I just finished reading this. It was very short. I did not realize that Norton Juster was a mathematician.
which makes it make so much more sense why the Phantom Toll Booth is included in my We Need More Books About Math. This is a book about math, and I wanted to share the dedication, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And that's this here. Oh look, we got a little Gordon doing his little cute thing. This was cute. It does say that it's a romance. I will say, for some reason I thought it was going to be cuter. It's not cute, it's just math. It was good, just a very small tinge disappointed.
So, I started reading Teaching a Stone to Talk last night. There is this very wonderfully vibrant way that she is writing. I was gonna say invasive. It's very, like, it sticks. Interesting flow in here. She's talking about an eclipse that she was present for, which I love the timing of that. That big total eclipse just happened earlier this month. I have heard a bunch of people talk about their experience with it and how surreal it is. And she has ways of talking about her experience with it. At once, this disc of sky slid over the sun like a lid. The sky snapped over the sun like a lens cover. Even though she knows it's the moon, she would never think that it was the moon. It didn't look like the moon. If she was like one of those ancient people who didn't know that it was the moon, there would be a lot of scary, scary reasons why that would happen rather than the moon. Enjoying it so far. I don't know what like the theme we're looking for is. I was just in this little chair in my front yard reading. This guy was outside with me. He doesn't seem to remember that I did let him outside and that we had a good time together. I have been reading this book. There is a chapter about weasels that I really, really enjoyed. And then I'm now on one where it's like going back and forth between Arctic expeditions and like the Catholic Church. It's kind of weird. We're having a great time. Hello. I feel like I really have some emo hair going on. My bangs are just too long. I really need to trim them. It is Monday morning now. I have a few minutes to read a little bit before I go into work. And I'm still in this chapter that's like going back and forth between this like Catholic Church and like Arctic explorers. I am not understanding what is trying to be done at all. It's been weird. I did dog ear this one quote. It says, "It all seems a pity at first, for I have overcome a fiercely anti-Catholic upbringing in order to attend Mass, simply and solely to escape Protestant guitars. Why am I here? Who gave these nice Catholics guitars? Why are they not mumbling in Latin and performing superstitious rituals? What is the Pope thinking of?" I love that. It is now the following Sunday. Lost an entire week, I suppose. I haven't really been reading much the last few days. I don't think I read anything yesterday. Yesterday it poured. I have been making, crocheting, this is all single crochet, a laundry hamper bag. So I was going to get some laundry hampers, like nice laundry hampers from like Etsy or something. There are some like laundry hamper bags, but they were really expensive. I was just like, well, you know what? I could make it and I could make it be exactly what I want. So I just decided to make my own. This is a reading vlog. I haven't been reading. Anyway, I think I'm gonna go get another cup of coffee, pop out into the garden a little bit. Got a couple of well-behaved boys here. Look at Lou. Sleepy guys. Good morning. It is Friday. It is a day off for me. I decided to take Friday off. There's a specific patch of my front yard that I want to dig out some salsify, and then I want to plant in corn. I just haven't really been reading, honestly. I've been reading a little bit of manga for a separate manga reading vlog. There's just too much going on. There's a lot of garden stuff going on and then work. Anyway, using today as like a little bit of a reset. Oh, I just heard the little jingle that my washing is done, so I can go hang that on the line now. I have now hung up my clothes to dry. I've also read a few more stories from Teaching a Stone to Talk. I am now in the middle of a story about the Galapagos Islands. It's called Life on the Rocks. I'm getting pretty close to the end. I don't know, I'm not feeling very well. I have like a low-grade headache that's just kind of hovering around. I am finding myself a little bit distracted while reading this. I'm not loving it. I think it's good. I enjoyed the beginning. I really liked the story about the solar eclipse. I've enjoyed certain aspects of it, but one of the aspects that was so long was that one about the Arctic exploration interspersed with like church people. And I just fundamentally don't understand what was going on there. There was also a story. She was living on the Amazon for a small period of time. There was a small young deer that was captured in order to eat. Preface this with, I'm a vegetarian. There's this deer tied up to a tree and it keeps injuring itself trying to get away. It's almost like she's proud that she's like not like other girls and that she is fine with being around that. And it's like the men are like, oh, other women would be so appalled by this and you're not even flinching. And I'm like, why would you want to put that on display? I think it's disgusting. So anyway, that made me lose like a bit of respect for her. Like, why would you include this in this story? Like, I don't like the idea of seeing something suffer. And then she's like, I'm eating it. I'm so happy about it. I just think it's gross. I think it's fine to understand that nature does not have human morality wrapped around in it. There is so much suffering for no reason. To see a deer suffering before it is killed and it's to tenderize the meat so that it's more delicious when you eat it. I just think it's reprehensible and I really was disgusted by that story, to be perfectly honest. Clearly I'm in a very bad mental place right now, so I'm bringing a lot of bad to this. There is plenty of good in this. There's plenty of beautiful language and it is lovely. And I'm trying to see the good in things right now. I really am. I just took some photos of like flowers and stuff, but I'm just having a hard time. I'm just having a hard time, guys. I just had a big long nap on the couch with Clover spooned in my little chest and Louie spooned in my little legs. And for the second time in my whole life, as far as I know, I experienced sleep paralysis. I had this sensation that there was somebody right up in my yard, right next to my window where I was napping. And I was trying so desperately hard to open my eyes. So desperately hard. And I was like trying so hard to move. And to the extent where I was like able to move my hand very slightly, and I was trying to pry open my eyes with my hand, and I was able to get one eye open, but I couldn't look around, and it was very disturbing. Yeah. so that just happened to me, but it was okay. It was fine. Everything was okay. I'm gonna try to finish reading this book. Last night I did finish reading Teaching a Stone to Talk by Annie Dillard, and I finished reading that before we went out to get some food. We went out to like a local brewery to eat some food, and that's kind of when I realized why I'd been so sad yesterday, and it has to do with Mother's Day being this Sunday. Basically mourning my mother-in-law. The last time that I saw her was on Mother's Day. Then we went to a bar and we had a few drinks. I think I'm feeling a little bit better now. I'm also more aware. So let's talk about this book. So, Teaching a Stone to Talk, I definitely didn't like it as much as Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, and I think I have identified some reasons why that's so. One of the reasons is that there is a lot of talk about God, and it really seems like she's trying to figure something out, connect something for herself between natural encounters and God. which to me just doesn't make any sense, and I can't relate, I guess. So this was a review that I feel like put my thoughts into words. This is a review by Sophie H. It's a 1-star review. And it says, there's probably more mention of God and religion than there is about the natural world. Admittedly, she can be poetic at times, but the writing is also overly flowery, disjointed, repetitive, and plain annoying in some instances. I don't have that hard of a time with the writing being so flowery. I think that's okay, but I do have a hard time with, like, what are you trying to say? I rated this a 3. Last night I started reading A Bitter Magic. I got to just before chapter 3. This definitely reads very middle grade. It has a very simple sentence structure. They're in some sort of like entertaining venue, and our main character's mom is like a magician or something similar, and she has made herself disappear, but she hasn't come back. It was a little later in the morning, still on Saturday. So I mentioned that I finished reading Teaching a Stone to Talk last night. I did dog-ear quite a lot of pages for quotes and such. There are some good lines and there are some funny lines, like the ones with the, like, who gave these nice Catholics guitars or whatever. Here's another funny one. It's about a neighbor who is kind of a recluse. He refuses all visitors but young women and girls. When other people come into his woods, he hides and watches them. He hides in the hemlocks. He hides in a silver maple. He hides among clumps of witch hazel. He hides and watches the people knock on his door. He told me all this. The interesting part is why people visit him at all. Because he is hiding in the woods, he cannot refuse zucchini squash. He is the valley's sole outlet for zucchini squash. I love that. I think that's so funny. And I mentioned R. Buckminster Fuller, who wrote Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. This is very relevant to the fact that he is on the cover. The planet is less like an enclosed spaceship Earth, than it is like an exposed mangrove island, beautiful and loose. We the people started small and have since accumulated a great and solacing muck of soil, of human culture. We are rooted in it. We are bearing it with us across nowhere. The word nowhere is our cue. The consort of musicians strikes up, and we in the chorus stir and move and start twirling our hats. A mangrove island turns drift to dance. It creates its own soil as it goes, rocking over the salt sea at random, rocking day and night round the sun, rocking round the sun and out towards east of Hercules. I love the description of the mangroves, and then you can kind of tell how the writing gets kind of lost in itself. A Bitter Magic, I have continued reading that this morning. Her uncle has this creepy, like, not magical, but illusionary house. So it's got like a hall of mirrors that change every day, and they give tours to the public to entertain them. And so she, our main character, is like navigating this hall of mirrors trying to find, ooh, there's a swallowtail. Butterfly. Anyway, she lives in this like really wonderfully creepy like magician's house, and she is trying to get into her mother's bedroom because her mother is still missing. So far, fun. I do have to say, the one thing that has been a little bit concerning, basically this book uses a slur for the Roma people, and there are descriptions about those people. They're not the most appropriate. That part of this book is a little concerning. This was published in 2015, and I feel like in 2015 we knew that it wasn't appropriate to use that slur to refer to people. Take that as you will. Oh, throw the book down. Since the last update, I have gone to a craft fair hosted by our local plant club. They were selling plants and crafts. They got these really, really cool earrings that are crocheted. Kind of looks like a Marigold. They make me more confident in my blue dress because I don't usually wear blue and I don't really know what to wear with it. I got these also crocheted earrings. They have various different colors and they're a really cool shape. A little triangle zooming in. And we also got a bird bath. I am about to go mow the lawn. I am dressed like a little farmer. I have my earrings in again. I did not read a ton of A Bitter Magic last night because I fell right asleep. I am really into it though. I've been having a good time. Also started watching a show yesterday, Roswell. Just obsessed. So I have an update on A Bitter Magic. We're following this girl. She's maybe like 13 or something and her name is, I think, like Cecily. Her mom is magical and she's gone missing and now she's trying to figure out like what's happening. I feel like I'm deep enough in it now that if I explain what's going on, I'll be giving out spoilers. So I'll just say that I have been enjoying it. Haven't found like a ton of time to sit down and read recently, but I was able to read like 40 pages this morning. It's fun, it's easy to read, and I'm intrigued. But it's really not exactly the same wow feeling that I got from reading The Great Good Thing. I have just finished reading A Bitter Magic by Roderick Townley. Previously, I had read A Great Good Thing by Roderick Townley, and it was so unexpectedly deeper than I thought it would be. A Bitter Magic is a much more straightforward story. It's about this girl named Cicely. She has an uncle named Asa, and her mother is like magical. Her uncle is not magical, but he runs kind of like a Hall of Mirrors, like illusionist kind of business. They're also very rich, and her mother goes missing, and she's trying to figure out what happened. There's something a little bit off to me about the middle section of this book. She has like this pet lobster, and then she doesn't, and then she has like this seashell, and then she doesn't, and then she has like this certain friend, and then she doesn't, and then she has this certain maid, and then she doesn't. So it kind of like hampers the flow a little bit who her companions are. I just didn't really think that that went very well. She is highlighted as being quite lonely and without that support network, but it was not that fun to read. So I will say this book is quite dark. Part 4 of the book is kind of the climax, really when things start to go down. And it is a lot darker than what I was expecting. What I thought the book was really, really great at was the setting, the vibe, kind of magical aspects were really fun. And I guess lastly, I don't think there was a ton for me to take away from this as opposed to The Great Good Thing, where it's really about death and grieving and memory and like cycles of life. What I got from this book is like bad people are bad when you let that wrathful side of yourself control you. It leads to bad things. A bit disappointed, but for a middle grade, I thought it was totally acceptable. I didn't dislike it. I probably will rate it a 4. So far, the books have just been a little bit disappointing. The next 2 books I have to pick up are The Garden Jungle and Wind, Sand, and Stars, and I really don't know which I'm gonna pick up next. Hello, I've just woken up. It's been a long time since I have been reading books from 5-star authors. I'm gonna start another one because I just finished my little Star Trek book and I need another physical book to be reading. I'm going to start The Garden Jungle. I have recently gotten really into trying to learn about the insect life in my garden. I'm really into permaculture, so I think this will be a fun book for me. Our other big plans, huge plans, honestly, for today. We are going to look at a kitten because Gordon has passed and there's no way to replace him in any way at all. But our cat Louie is in desperate need of a friend. We're at least gonna go look at this kitten and see if we want to adopt him. It's always crazy to have a kitten in the house, but we'll see. I think that's about it. I'm gonna go hop into the shower in a few minutes, but first I wanted to update you guys on my experience reading The Garden Jungle. I've been loving this. I have been loving this. I have read 16 pages, or up to page 16. I also read the prologue. I have dog-eared 4 pages. Would you like to hear some quotes? He would rather spend 10 minutes lying on his tummy watching a woodlouse than an hour watching a glossy television program about lions in the Serengeti. That's how I feel about life. Much of my personal inspiration to battle on has always come from the small-scale victories I can achieve in my own garden. For that is a little corner of earth that I can control, that is small enough for my brain to comprehend, and where I can make things right. I'm having a wonderful time. I've been learning a ton about the insects in my garden recently. There's mention of the cabbage family, brassicas, that they have developed a compound, the compound that makes them smell like cabbage, you know, that is poisonous to most insects. And so the insects that do affect those plants have evolved defenses against that poison, and he mentions that harlequin beetles have been able to harness that poisonous compound and like they store it in their body so that they are then unpalatable to other predators. I was like, this is so cool. This is so cool. I have these little harlequin beetles in my own yard. We have a kitten now. His name is Big Al. I'll show him to you soon. That's Big Al. I've been reading The Garden Jungle this morning. I'm having the weirdest morning, actually. Also, this is also from Big Al. I've been having crazy, like, low-level fever dreams. I had a dream that there was, like, a spy plane in my town. I really appreciated this chapter about earwigs. Earwigs are actually quite beneficial in the garden. He just won't sleep. He's like the first kitten I've ever met that just doesn't sleep. Here he is. This is him. This is Big Al. He is as sweet as can be when it comes to wanting to cuddle and wanting to play. He's very, very sweet. He's purring right now. I don't know if you can hear that. He doesn't really understand the limitations of the human body, and he also doesn't nap. He seems a little clingy, to be honest. I learned that earwigs are very good for the garden. They eat a whole bunch of like pest species. Specifically, they eat a ton of aphids. And I learned that male earwigs have curved pincers and females have straight pincers, and that the pincers are critical for like their mating ritual. So if a male does not have their pincers, they won't mate. I wish this chapter, it's called Earwigs in My Orchard, was more about the specifics of earwigs and less about the orchard, to be honest, but that's just because I love reading about bugs. I really do. I'm so happy that this has not been disappointing. So I have a soybean allergy, and one of the things that's really difficult to find without soy in it is wafer cookies. And like the cream-filled ones, like, you know how they have like vanilla, strawberry, chocolate wafer cookies? There's one brand that you can find at Asian markets that's like this green tea wafer cookie, and those are really, really good. But I don't really have a lot of great access to that. So I did also find that they have a gluten-free wafer cookie. I think it's by Glutino. They have a lemon wafer cookie, and I've been having the time of my life eating wafer cookies. Garden Jungle. Excuse me. I've been reading The Garden Jungle by Dave Goulson. Silent Earth was very doom and gloom. Very heavy on insect declines, proof of insect declines, and the impact of pesticides on bees, other insects. This book, I just got through a very heavy chapter called The Toxic Cocktail, which has to do with pesticides and insecticides and the really awful practices that are currently in place. So the chapter that I just read was very heavy and not fun. I really enjoyed the first chapter of this book because it talks about what you can do in your garden and how you can have a really wonderful impact. It talks about what people can do. We've just gone into a doom and gloom thing. There was a statement about how in Sacramento they have basically been dousing the streets with pesticides everywhere in the town. Pesticides don't just target one insect. You end up killing everything, which is insane. So that was tough to get through. I do want to highlight this one sentence that I've just read from this new chapter I've started, The Buzzing of the Bees. He's talking about how there are some researchers working on robotic bees. This quote, I think, sums up a lot of my feelings about what the fuck we're doing. Do we always have to look for a technical solution to the problems that we create when a simple, natural solution is staring at us in the face? We have wonderfully efficient pollinators already. Let's look after them, not plan for their demise. And I completely agree. So much of technology is like, all right, so we fucked up. Let's plan for us to be more fucked up. How about we just try to unfuck up? It's like, oh no, that's harder. It's like, actually, it's easier. And some of his commentary, he does come across as quite privileged because he's talking about like buying organic. And he says like, if you just hedge your bets and assume that pesticides are bad for your health, because we don't know. They probably are. We have no idea. There's no studies. If they are bad for your health, and we consume huge amounts of pesticides, just hedge your bets, go organic, because even though there are some pesticides with organic foods, because they're like natural pesticides, it'll be far less than whatever you have with non-organic foods. Like, what's the con? There's no con. Like, oh no, you'll just have been eating less pesticides. I'm like, the very real con that many people face every day they go to the grocery store is organic foods are more expensive and food in general is expensive. So if you're faced with like a bag of green onions that are 99 cents and a bag of green onions that are $1.39, you want to be able to afford your food and your rent, then you're gonna go with the 99 cents. And that's like super obvious and super clear for so many people that I just think he must not understand that that price difference can really mean so much to people. I'm not saying that there's no reason that organic foods shouldn't cost more. I think they probably should, because it represents like the real cost of food. There should be labor that goes into food that makes it expensive, and it shouldn't just be produced by a big machine and a bunch of chemicals. I'm in my bug, oh my god, I'm in my bug era. I saw Katie did yesterday. I actually got a good photo of a cabbage butterfly. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about the common garden insects. This is what I wanted. This is why I was having such a wonderful time in the beginning. And now I'm just like, oh, the world's going to shit, which is not what I want to feel like. Just yesterday, we got back from a really short weekend trip to Vancouver, British Columbia. And it was the first time I've ever been to Canada. An alarmingly large amount of the BookTube folks that I watch are from Canada. Not sure exactly why that is. Vancouver was beautiful. Super beautiful. And we also went to near Squamish, and that was also incredibly beautiful. There were bunnies at the airport. That was weird. I've only seen like jackrabbits in the wild. I did finish 2 books on the plane, started another 2. One of the books that I finished is The Garden Jungle. I loved this so much. I had so much fun learning about different types of insects or other creatures in here. The table of contents There's Plants in Profusion, The Garden Meadow, Earwigs in My Orchard. I loved this chapter. The Toxic Cocktail. So The Toxic Cocktail was a lot about pesticides, herbicides. So I hated that chapter just because it wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to feel those feelings again. Then chapter 5 was The Buzzing of the Bees, which was all about bees, and that was very fun. 6 was Moth Mayhem, maybe one of my favorite chapters. I absolutely loved learning about moths. Chapter 7 was Dive into the Pond, about aquatic life. Very, very much enjoyed learning about insects, that their habitat is, I forget what they're called, but it's like, you know when there's a tree and it has like the shape where a puddle can be in the tree for a very, very long time? It's about insects that live in those habitats. Al's attacking my shadow that I'm leaving on the wall as I lift this book up and down. Hi, Al. Ants in My Plants. I got to learn about ants and their relationships with other types of ants and other creatures like aphids. The whole concept of ants farming, how they function in your garden. And one of the coolest things I learned from that was that there's this, I think it's a very large, I think it's the largest species of aphid, is only around because there's a species of ant that takes care of it. So similar to how we only have certain like domesticated species because we take care of them, like silkworms, for example. They only exist because ants take care of them. And in order for these ants to be about, there has to be a different ant that takes over the colony, a different species of ant that takes over the colony. And then this ant, this species of ant, also takes over that species of ant colony. But the original colony of ants is like a common black ant, and they have to get taken over, and then that species has to get taken over. So it's like so far removed from, like there's so many chains to this aphid species existing. It's so interesting. I did not realize that some ants just go in as a queen, go in and infiltrate, kill the queen, and take over the colony, and that's like their strategy because it's hard to create a colony. That was all very interesting to me. Chapter 9 was The Wriggling Worms, and I quite enjoyed this as well. I didn't know that much about worms. It seems like in general we don't know a ton about worms. The main thing to increase worms is increasing organic material in your garden or your farm. Chapter 10 was called Garden Invaders, and that was all about invasive species. Invasive species are so complicated because there are times when intervention is necessary, but the types of interventions can be very extreme. And there's also times when, even though it's invasive, our world is changing. Do we want life or no life? Sometimes that becomes the question. Hey little guy, how are you doing? Oh, okay. Oh, don't play with keys, please. Chapter 11 was The Cycle of a Life, and I don't really remember what that was about. Oh, this is about like composting, I think. Oh, and also a message about peat and not using peat in your garden if you can avoid it because it's just very unsustainable practice. Don't use peat, please. And then chapter 12 was Gardening to Save the Planet, and this covered some interesting things about allotments and the impact of allotments on like food production. Thoughts about this book. This book is very UK focused, so there will be general information that is applicable to everywhere. This has a huge UK focus, so just be aware. I did really enjoy it. He does get very passionate and like preachy, I suppose. For example, about using peat, which is fine with me because I totally agree and it's not in conflict with my beliefs at all. More than anything in this book, I loved learning about different insects and quirks about insects. The pieces that were more informative about the absolutely terrible things that we're doing, they're just hard to read because they're, again, so not in line with how I think things should be done. I gave this 5 stars. I definitely enjoyed my time with this one more than I enjoyed my time with Silent Earth, but Silent Earth obviously was so good and so important to read. Anyway, finally we got an extreme winner in this vlog, and that is The Garden Jungle. I have so many vlogs that are open-ended because I'm in the midst of reading all these books. I have a little bit more heat and pressure on finishing Wind, Sand, and Stars. I have sat down and started reading this. He is such a wonderful author. His use of words is so beautiful. Let me read this passage here. The context is he's talking about being a pilot and how frequently pilots die. Bit by bit, nevertheless, it comes over us that we shall never again hear the laughter of our friend, that this one garden is forever locked against us. And at that moment begins our true mourning, which, though it may not be rending, is yet a little bitter. For nothing in truth can replace that companion. Old friends cannot be created out of hand. Nothing can match the treasure of common memories, of trials endured together, of quarrels and reconciliations and generous emotions. It is idle, having planted an acorn in the morning, to expect that afternoon to sit in the shade of the oak. So life goes on. For years we plant the seed, we feel ourselves rich, and then come other years when time does its work and our plantation is made sparse and thin. One by one, our comrades slip away, deprive us of their shade. He's like maybe 39, 40. So he's not that old, but isn't that just such a lovely metaphor? I've been having a wonderful time with this. It is so beautifully written, and it is also about such a different world than mine that I'm finding every moment of it informative and interesting. I have a different topic. This is part of my corn harvest. I have a garden plot at work which has automatic watering, which is great because I really struggle with watering my garden at home. This is Atomic Orange corn from Baker Creek. So here's a very small ear of corn, and it also had poor pollination. Corn is wind pollinated. So sometimes you have too much growth or the pollen's like not available and you'll get poor pollination. But look at this rich, vibrant color and how beautiful it is. This one has this really pretty pinkish tone and like some yellows. I think this one's gorgeous as well. The variety of the corn I'm so happy with. Paler oranges, the really bright, like deep dark oranges. Something really strange happened to this ear of corn. I don't really know what went wrong there. But then I also got some oddball yellow and white corns. And these ones also have like a little red dot. Whoops. Hello. It is, I think, the next day after the last clip, and I'm like death today. I have some sort of cold. While I've been conscious, I've been reading Wind, Sand, and Stars. I haven't been conscious very much, so I haven't gotten very far. I'm on page 66. I did read a chapter where he's talking about being in a cyclone. Oh my god, it's terrifying. The sky was blue, pure blue, too pure. A hard blue sky that shone over the scraped and barren world, while the fleshless vertebra of the mountain chain flashed in the sunlight. Not a cloud. The blue sky glittered like a new honed knife. I just love the ability to make a pure blue sky scary. I had half of a burrito for lunch. I gotta go have the other half. I'm still sick, but the only symptoms I really have are like muscle aches and then like extreme lethargy. I slept almost all day yesterday. I went to bed at like 9 and I woke up. Well, I fed the cats and everything. Oh, speaking of cats, this little guy trills almost constantly. Also, look at how big he's gotten. He's huge. Look at him. He's like as big as Pebble now. Oh yeah, I woke up at 10 today, so I slept over 12 hours, and I slept almost all day yesterday. One of the reasons why I woke up is because my dog was whining, so she wanted to not be in the bed anymore, so Now I'm up. I haven't gone very far at all in this. This is how much I've been sleeping, because before when I've been sick, I'm on page 76. What was I before? Like 68 or something like that? Before, when I've been sick and I've been doing a reading vlog, I've read like a full book. I remember I read The Ways of a Mud Dauber when I was sick, and The Old Man and the Sea, and this time I've barely been able to read this at all. Today, I'm alone. I'm home alone. I'm left to my own devices. I've had like a weird break from reading, maybe like a small slump, because I've been entrenched in this interview process for another opportunity at my same workplace. I've just been elsewhere. I've been elsewhere in my brain. But I'm back. The interview process is over. I don't have anything left for myself to do, but see what they decide. I am still tasked with finishing Something Lands. Let me go get the book. Wind, Sand, and Stars. I feel like I've been saying this a lot. I have been really enjoying this book. I am now on page 144. I have a bit left to go, but I realized I haven't eaten lunch and it's like 3. Yeah, it's 3 p.m. I need to eat. That's what we're doing now. I think I'm gonna do a bean salad, which is one of my go-tos, and it entails a bean and then something like, it could be olives, or it could be, you know, like a lot of parsley, or it could be an onion and like tomatoes, and in this case, what I'm starting with as my base is garbanzo beans. And then I'm gonna get feta. So I have garbanzo beans and feta. I've determined another ingredient. I was just gonna be demeaning to them. I was gonna say, these are my shitty little tomatoes. This was from a store, but the inside are these shitty little tomatoes from my garden plot at work. I had volunteer tomatoes. And they don't taste good because these are like cross-pollinated weird little guys. There's a few things about them that I don't like. One, they split. All of them split. And you can see how much I don't like them because of how shriveled and nasty they are. I'm gonna use them because what else am I gonna do? Let me go look at the garden. Let me go see what I have. Hello. Garlic chives. A small amount of lemongrass, just for the ambiance. A lemon that is not really ripe, but it's what I got. One singular banana pepper. That's kind of small. Some lemon thyme. Not that much of that. Arugula. I fucking love the smell of arugula. Very importantly, oregano. And I have a tiny pepper that's supposed to be like spicy, I think. We'll see how that one goes. Wish me luck. I have just made this and I'm about to try it for the first time, so. Yeah. This was exactly what I needed to like want to eat food again. I love feeding myself from my garden. I have a kitten who demands to be held. I've just finished such a beautiful chapter of this book. I can see so wholly how experiences from this book informed his writing of The Little Prince. Anton? How do you say his name? In the chapter that I just read, he's lost in the desert. He's with a friend. They don't know where they are really, and they are at the whims of being rescued. There is this description of looking out after the sun has set, looking out and seeing the stars. And that is one thing that I'm getting from this book, that again, it's wind, sand, and stars. The stars are so important and such a part of his life, and I think that informs and inspires The Little Prince. Just looking out at those stars and like what are those worlds and all of that. So that's one part. Another part, obviously, being in the desert, being trapped, crash landed, whatever, landed without fuel in the desert. That's another aspect. They're really in a desperate situation. They need to find water because not only are they in the desert without anything, they have like some grapes and an orange. They're kind of like somewhat venturing off to see if they can figure out where a city is, where a source of water might be. And our author, he goes out and there's a few things that he sees. One thing that he sees is like the footprints of a fox. And so he's like following, he's like, what does this fox sustain itself on? And so there's kind of like this following of a fox, which a fox is a part of this story as well. So there's a description of our author, and it's a little hard to tell what's real and what's not, because there are these really extreme mirages. Can you see Al? He's trying to play with this box, so it's a little noisy. He's seeing that this fox is eating, I think they're snails. There are these plants, like strangely, there are a bunch of these plants near this fox's den. And there's like a bunch of snails on some of the plants. And then some of the plants are stripped of all their snails. And some of them, very strange. He is seeing people where there are no people. He is seeing lights where there are no lights. In The Little Prince, there is a point in the book where they come across a well in the desert. And it's very strange, right? How mysterious. In this book, he experiences seeing and coming across a well in the desert. And it's like, this is a permanent well. And there's like a, there's like a real well there. But unless I'm misinterpreting this, because it's not like he then is saved and drinks water and, I think that was all in his head. There's so much of his experience that informs this book. It's just stunning. If you love this book, I think you will be fascinated to read this book. When he thinks he's gonna die, he says, "A man cannot live a decent life in cities, and I need to feel myself live. I am not thinking of aviation. The airplane is a means, not an end. One doesn't risk one's life for a plane any more than a farmer plows for the sake of the plow. But the airplane is a means of getting away from towns and their bookkeeping and coming to grips with reality." This was just such an experience to read, and I'm so grateful that this was written by this man. I'm just feeling a certain type of way right now. I'm just feeling so grateful. This has been a wonderful experience. I've started the chapter Barcelona and Madrid. There is a civil war happening. I'm not entirely sure what our author is doing there, but it seems at least some of the time he is sent in to take people out, to go get like fellow Frenchmen or other people and offer them asylum. The language of this is so good. "A man is simply stood up against a wall, and he gives up his entrails to the stones of the courtyard. You have been captured. You are shot. Reason. Your ideas were not our ideas." Gives up his entrails to the stones of the courtyard. He is a wonderful, wonderful writer. For dinner, I have 2 squashes. Here is what I've concocted. We've officially made it to evening. I've got the lights on. I have a quote. We have some differences of opinions. Let me be real about that. He's trying to get to the root of what makes a man willing to die in war. What all of us want is to be set free. The man who sinks his pickaxe into the ground wants that stroke to mean something. The convict's stroke is not the same as the prospector's, for the obvious reason that the prospector's stroke has meaning and the convict's stroke has none. It would be a mistake to think that the prison exists at the point where the convict's stroke is dealt. Prison is not merely physical horror. It is using a pickaxe to no purpose that makes a prison. The horror resides in the failure to enlist all those who swing the pick in the community of mankind. We all yearn to escape from prison. I finished the book. Obviously, this is a 5-star. It speaks to me. I'd like to read one final quote. To come to man's estate, it is not necessary to get oneself killed round Madrid, or to fly mail planes, or to struggle wearily in the snows out of respect for the dignity of life. The man who can see the miraculous in a poem, who can take pure joy from music, who can break his bread with comrades, opens his window to the same refreshing wind off the sea. He too learns the language of men. But too many men are left unawakened. These final thoughts still feel so prevalent for, and maybe even more prevalent for our modern day, although of course this time was incredibly fraught with war. This was published in 1939. This is making me speechless, besides just reading the quotes from the book itself that are so pulling at the full essence of things that I think, and I just feel like this is happening to me, and putting it into words, and I feel seen. I feel like I could cry just thinking about how this made me feel. I'm not going to. I don't have to, but I feel like I could. I have read so many books since the beginning of this vlog that were not a part of this vlog. This took me so long to complete. So let's revisit each book, especially for me, because for you it will be, I don't know how long, probably far too long, but it'll be within one video. And for me, this has been months, I think. So the first book that I read was The Dot and the Line, written by Norton Juster, who wrote one of my favorite books, The Phantom Tollbooth. The Dot and the Line, I really didn't know what I was expecting, but it's called The Dot and the Line, A Romance in Lower Mathematics. A book about math? This sounds great. And I did appreciate that. It was a little bit like Flatland. So I will say there were some things that I appreciated about this book, but this, in my opinion, was nowhere near on the level or in my heart as The Phantom Tollbooth. I was disappointed by this. The next book that I completed was Teaching a Stone to Talk by Annie Dillard, who wrote Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, something I was so enamored with last year. I thought this was a beautiful example of nature writing. Now, this, despite being so short, I feel like it took me so long to get through. There were some wonderful chapters or essays. I dog-eared so much. So clearly there was a lot that I took out of it as like wonderful lines or interesting thoughts. But overall, I was disappointed by this. And now, when I think about it, the things that I remember about this are bad. The next book that I read or completed was A Bitter Magic by Roderick Townley. For what this was, I did enjoy it. I thought this was a solid middle grade novel. Dreary and yet magical, which I did enjoy. But there were aspects of it that I didn't quite like and that I also thought were a little problematic. But why I read this book is this book that I read last year called The Great Good Thing. This book was such a surprise. It gets so much bigger and more important than this storybook. It's about death and memory, being remembered. It was just so much more than a silly little story. In comparison to this, yes, a Bitter Magic does pale in comparison. Next, The Garden Jungle by Dave Goulson. I loved this. I thought this was so wonderful. Almost every chapter I did enjoy, except for the chapter called The Toxic Cocktail, which I think I mostly didn't enjoy because it was very similar to this book, which is why I read this book, called Silent Earth, Averting the Insect Apocalypse. And I actually thought that this book was more my speed than this book, although this one was so educational and informative. Yes, I absolutely loved this, and I absolutely recommend this. And then this is the, you know how when I love a book, I have a hard time talking about it? Well, when I read something that is a new favorite of all time, I get left a little speechless. This says so many things. There is so much experience in this book that informs these opinions and these observations. It just puts into words some things that I feel about the world. Oh, it was just so wonderful. The reason why I'm reading this is because of this book, which so many of you have read. The Little Prince. I love The Little Prince. I want to sit down and reread this book right now. It shows you the real world background for how and why The Little Prince was written. Even with favorite books, there are sections that are maybe overlooked. There's a chapter here about a slave. The author purchases a slave to set him free. And I think I would have to reread that one a little bit to try to understand really what was going on in there. It's so unassuming too. Like, look at this. Do you think this would be life-changing? What a journey we've been on. Who are some authors where you read one of their works and it was a 5-star and you're thinking about picking up another book from that author? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear that. By golly, did I learn? It's a gamble. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did enjoy this, consider sharing it with a friend who you think would also enjoy it. Consider liking and subscribing, and I will be back again soon.